Welcome to our new series, InfoDrop. These will be audio-only episodes that drop the first Monday of every month. They're a little shorter than our usual episodes, but we felt that they were special enough to include. Kick back and relax for our first InfoDrop.
Yeah, that might be the new intro.
I know this is supposed to be a relaxing new series that we're doing, but we're going to start with kind of a serious topic. Unions. And it's just very apparent in my life right now, and I want to
Spread some information that is lacking, I fear.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know about unions, I hope that this can be a resource. I'm going to do a kind of question-answer format here. So, for clarity, when I'm referencing a union, it's the collective employees, and when referencing a union organization, it's the nationally recognized labor union. So, first question is, what is a union? A labor union is a group of two or more employees who join together to advance common interests such as wages, benefits, schedules, and other employment terms and conditions. That's from the Department of Labor. So basically, it's just two employees that come together. That's all a union has to be. Unions utilize collective bargaining, meaning the group of employees or union negotiates with management. Workers have the right to organize, join together, and make negotiations based on their livelihood in any business. So how does a union work? A union is not specifically backed by an organization. If 30% of employees want to form a union, they have to sign cards or a petition stating their support, and the NLRB will hold an election. Or, as I've learned, a union can be voluntarily recognized. So basically what that is all the employees say, hey, we want a union, voluntarily recognize us, and the employer can say, okay, you're a union now. And it's very succinct and easy, and because everyone's like, oh, well, if they hold a vote, then isn't that the best thing that you can do? And it's like, well, no, it's actually voluntarily recognizing the union. Anyway. Yeah. So the NLRB is the National Labor Relations Board, and their sole purpose is to aid in the union forming process and enforcing the National Labor Relations Act from 1935. So they are basically just a source for how to make union and what laws are applicable in union situations. An outside organization is not necessary for a union formation, but they can aid with organization tactics and regulations. Organizations such as the National Education Association. This includes teachers, administration, cafeteria workers, and janitors.
Go janitors.
Hell yeah, Neil Flynn. So, another one is Teamsters, a very common one everyone hears about, is truck drivers, warehouse workers, and miscellaneous trades. And then there's the United Food and Commercial Workers, which is typically retail store and distribution employees. I'm going to add another one that I recently learned a lot about is IAM, is the, it's not written down, so it's going to take me a second. It's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. That was a pretty cool one. Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
It's another union.
Yeah.
The AFL-CIO is a federation of unions, so it's 65 affiliated unions, and it's millions of people represented. So a federation in government talk is like a bunch of countries forming one unit and working together as governments. So a federation of unions is just a bunch of the individual unions coming together under one umbrella. So it's just you can call AFL-CIO and be like, hey, can you get me in touch with a union that is applicable in my field?
Right.
And they'll be like, hell yeah, give me 2 minutes. And hopefully they'll get you a union.
Heck yeah.
Once recognized as a union, the employees form a contract that includes improvements they'd like to see. The union picks representative employees to hold a negotiation meeting with management, which can also be attended by your union organization. So, a common thing that I keep hearing is that people are worried about certain very specific things when it comes to a union. When someone is faced with, do you want to join a union? They ask, well, what about my health care? Well, what about my pay?
Right.
And all of those things come down to your union representatives, which are your fellow coworkers, the people that you elect in your own meetings, at your employee meetings that you have, because you'll have to have them. And you pick two people, it's usually two people, to go represent you in your meeting with management. And then if you want, the guys from the union who fund all your legal processes and stuff, they can pull up and be like, yo, I'll help out. I'll negotiate for you or whatever, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if the union is like, if your union organization is like, hey, we think you should do this. And you're like, I don't want to. You just say no, and it doesn't go in the contract. Or if you have to negotiate around it, negotiations, you know. But they're also good faith negotiations. Those are important. So it has to be, both parties have to be negotiating in good faith.
Gotcha.
So that negates the idea of like, oh, well, it'll put out a small business because the people will ask for too high of wages and then they can't pay their workers. And it's like, a main thing about union contracts is that employers cannot pay above their profit margins. But oftentimes without a union, there is wiggle room there to get a higher wage.
Right. So it's basically like they're the middleman of your conversation as an employee versus your employer.
Yes.
It's like they're just there to facilitate being kind of the like person of contact, I guess, for lack of a better word.
And also someone who understands jargon a little better than someone like me. That would be my main thing. Then I'd be like, okay, is this legal?
Right.
Can they do this?
Right. Exactly. It's kind of the contact person to be like, is this actually what we can and can't do? Am I being swept under the rug from these certain things? Like just kind of being an unbiased third party for the conversation.
Because that's another common thing. People do think that unions are biased and they just want your money, and they fucking don't.
Right.
The main thing is that so unions are nonprofit.
Right.
And that's very important. Because there's so many things going through my head right now, I can't even. Unions are they're not trying to take your money. All your dues go into funds for your particular set of employees, your coworkers.
Right. Are any of those dues at all going to the union whatsoever?
I would believe a very small percentage would go to funding, salaries for, legal representation and stuff like that. And the people who have to organize the legal representation,
Right. But for the most part,
that would be Luna.
I'm going to wait for her.
Yeah, that's probably a good plan.
So the union, worker themselves in the organization obviously gets paid by their employer at the union organization. And then, I'm assuming some, supplementation of their salary is from the dues that a union worker would pay.
Right.
But it's not all of it, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other, I think I have this somewhere else. Dues are only 1 to 3% of your weekly paycheck.
Weekly.
Yes.
Okay.
So for me, it would be about $30 a month.
Right.
Anyway. All right. So, common things asked for in union negotiations are higher wages, better health insurance, improved safety, and fair scheduling. And this is interesting because Maine is an employment at will state, and employment at will is overridden by union contracts requiring just cause for termination. If your workplace becomes unionized and you don't want to be involved, it's within your right to refrain. Employers or unions cannot force you to pay dues, and yet the union will represent you while you are employed there. And that's Maine legislature.
So, like, let's say your workplace unionizes and you don't want to be a part of it. They're still in a union and you're just not in it?
Yeah, so basically, if your workplace unionizes, so if your specific location unionizes, because a lot of the times it's not a full corporation, it's just specific locations.
Right.
If your specific location unionizes and you don't want to be a part of it, you still work there. You are still part of the union, but you don't have to pay dues.
Okay.
So that being said,
you get all the benefits.
yeah, you get all the benefits.
Okay.
So if you don't want to be involved with the union, you are not forced to pay dues, but you are still part of the collective bargaining unit. So you don't have to be involved, but you are still represented by the union. Their legal teams will represent you. You still get better wages, etc.
Right.
Yeah, and there's also a thing called a union security agreement.
Okay.
Which in your negotiations, they can be, one of the parties can ask for this, and I don't totally understand it because I don't really know who it benefits. But basically, in a union negotiation, a party can say, well, I don't want someone mooching off the benefits of others or whatever.
Yeah.
Everyone has to pay dues. So basically what happens is you enter this union security agreement, and anyone who is hired within 30 days has to start paying dues to the union. But if you do not want to be part of the union still, this is a subsidized amount of union dues that typically just cover like legal fees and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So question number 3. How do unions affect employees? The first thing on people's minds is dues. Union dues are regular payments made to maintain the union and provide benefits and services to employees. There are no dues until you vote yes on the union contract, and if you don't feel as though the contract is worth the dues, you can vote no and re-bargain. Dues can also go into a strike fund, supplementing lost income in case of a strike. Unionized employees typically have increased rates of productivity and job satisfaction because their job is better in many aspects. Higher wages that can be upwards of 10 to 15% by some resources, safer conditions, and better benefits. Unions have been proven to strengthen the middle class and grow the economy. According to the Economic Policy Institute, in states that have more unionization, wages increased by thousands, unemployment rates went down, more people have access to affordable medical care, and education budgets are higher among more union-dense states. Dues are typically 2% of your, or less, of your gross wages, but anywhere from 1 to 3%. Excluding overtime. If you make $600 a week for 40 hours, you'll have to pay $12 in dues. But if the union increases wages by 10 to 15%, dues are kind of null and void. An important thing to remember is that the group forms a contract. You as an employee have a right and a vote in what goes into the contract and majority rules. And most negatives I find seem to be in relation to larger corporate unions, such as stricter schedules or hiring based on seniority and not skill, or individual bargaining restrictions. But these are all protocol put in place by your union. And if the collective votes to keep schedules loose, hire based on capability, or keep individual bargaining rights, it all stays. So how do unions affect small businesses? There's not a lot of info on small businesses unionizing. And I just thought it was because it doesn't happen often. But I've recently learned that, especially in Portland, there are a fair amount of small businesses that are unionized.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there has been one out of the many that has shut down, and that was specifically because they worked with a union representation that got them set up. This union organization hopped into Maine and said, we'll help you start a union, and then got it going, and then disappeared. I forget what store this was. But basically, long story short, allegedly, there was one place that did close, but that was because, or I don't know if it closed or just the union failed. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know, and I can't even look it up. Never mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, but all the other businesses in Portland, well, not all the other businesses in Portland that are unionized seem to be doing just well. Just fine and dandy.
Right, I haven't heard anything.
Right? And there are a lot that have been voluntarily recognized. And voluntary recognition is much more, much better in the eyes of, just being a good person.
Yeah.
If a team wants a union, just recognize it. It's easier.
Right.
Anyway. So, unions can also improve small businesses with results such as higher productivity and employee retention. So you're spending less money on training people, new people that come in. You've got more people learning more stuff. You've got people moving up in the company and stuff. You've got a lot less expenses when it comes to turnover. I think people want to believe that a small business doesn't need a union, and by forming one, it'll go under, but it's not necessarily the case. There are plenty of small businesses that have succeeded in their employees unionizing, and they're still running just fine. All unionizing is just a negotiation.
Right, it's more of just exactly. It's more of just not that the employer and the employees can't come to an agreement, but it's genuinely just to have a third person there to make sure it follows through.
Right? And even so, even if say you don't even have your union rep at your meetings, it's a different idea. It was explained to me that instead of you walking into a job and you saying, what's the wage for this job, blah, blah, blah. And them just telling you, okay, these are the rules right now, and I can change them at any point to my discretion. Entering a union contract just says, hey, we got to agree on these rules.
Right.
You can't just change them, and I have a say in what these rules are. That's all a union contract does.
Yeah.
So, a fun little tidbit that I thought would be interesting to include would be, what is a strike? What is a strike? Strike.
He's on strike.
So, a strike is a refusal to work organized by a body of employees as a form of protest, typically in an attempt to gain concessions from their employer. That is from Oxford Dictionaries, or Oxford definitions. There are two types of strikes. unfair labor practice strikers who are striking to protest an unfair labor practice, and economic strikers who are striking to obtain some sort of concession. So unfair labor practice strikers have a lot more legal backing, because it's like, okay, there's an unfair labor practice happening, and that is big problem. But an economic striker is asking for something like higher wages that is typically not like regulated. That's typically more of a, I'm not going to work until you do the thing that I want you to do, rather than I'm not going to work until it's safe or something like that. So a union can collectively decide to strike depending on certain criteria. That is from the NLRB. This is all from the NLRB now. So lawful and unlawful strikes are two different things, and lawfulness can depend on purpose, timing, or the conduct of the strikers. If the strike is over something the union can affect, it's lawful. If the purpose is unlawful, such as striking because of a business partner, then the strike is unlawful. The actual example they gave was, if you work for company A and one of their partners is company B, and you don't like company B, you can't strike to get them to stop working with company B, because that's legal.
Right.
They're allowed to do that. So timing, during a no strike provision in the contract, so literally in the contract, you write beep, beep, boop, boop, at this time, do not strike.
Which is crazy.
Just a little bit. But it's also, I think it's like because I also have to, I'm watching a lot of Scrubs. Been mentioning that in a lot of episodes lately. There is, they made a comment about about nurses unionizing. And I've been thinking a lot about labor unions in hospitals, and how when nurses or doctors go on strike, which I don't even know if doctors can go on strike. I know nurses can, though. So when nurses go on strike, they have to inform their employer 2 weeks before the strike.
For because it's medical stuff?
Yeah, because if they strike and there are not enough nurses on the floor, if they don't get enough nurses to cover, people will die.
Yeah.
Understandable, but it's also that defeats the purpose.
No, exactly. No, that's exactly what I was just gonna say.
But I guess it is also okay, now you have people who are doing extra work, and they're not going to stick around to do extra work. So now you have the fear of more people leaving, and
Right. I feel at that point, you being I'm going to strike in 2 weeks is more of you better get your act together. You have 2 weeks to stop us from striking and get your act together. It's more of a barrier of
right. Or you have 2 weeks to union bust.
That, yeah, exactly.
If you are a union employee, you do not have to strike, but you can be subject to fines or penalties from a union organization, allegedly.
From not striking? Or
yes.
Oh.
Yeah, so if your union organization, if everyone in your collective is nah, we're going to strike, and your union organization is fuck yeah, let's strike. And you're ooh, nah, I'm going to keep working.
Oh, okay, I guess, yeah. I guess my brain just didn't click that a strike means you're not working at all, then you're striking against working. I guess, yeah. I didn't.
Yeah.
My brain just was thinking of the SpongeBob episode where they're just picketing. I didn't yeah. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, so it's very much which is kind of stupid, because if you're working because you need the money, but that's also why there's a strike fund.
Oh.
Because I mentioned that earlier about dues.
Right. Yeah, I totally forgot. Yeah.
So, in the case of you being oh no, I can't afford to not work during the strike, there would hopefully be a strike fund that your union put in place. But,
okay.
Yeah, I have no idea what those fines or penalties could be. They could literally be an email, a cease and desist for not striking.
That's absolutely absurd.
A cease and desist for doing your job.
Crazy.
Do your job, Hannah.
Do your job, Hannah.
So anyway, if you're not a union employee at a unionized workplace and they're striking, you can join in free of charge.
Heck yeah.
Woo! Don't mind me. Causing
Right.
a ruckus. So, common ways people will try to persuade you about unions. I'm going to start with some union busting, which I've learned so much more about, and it's a crazy concept. There are actual organizations out there that exist to make money off of getting employees to not form unions. There are entire fucking companies that are just like, we help you keep control of your employees. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So the term union busting is for actions taken by employers to prevent unions from forming. If you want to get in depth into union busting tactics, the UFCW, the United Food, that one I mentioned earlier, has great resources. I'm blasting that out. I love their union, but I haven't watched their videos, but they have a lot of videos too. So employers' actions that can be considered union busting. Actually, I have a very interesting thing from the NLRB that I can actually peek through real quick. So love bombing is a common thing. Like, we're a family and we have an open door for communication.
Yeah.
And saying, if you unionize, we'll have to close. Or all unions want are your dues. One thing that got me was the idea of a captive audience meeting. And there was actually an incident with Amazon workers in 2024 that I believe the Amazon workers won because they were held in a captive audience meeting. And it's a mandatory meeting where your employer shares their views on the union. An employer can straddle legality by giving advance notice to their workers of the topic of the meeting, saying attendance is voluntary and no adverse consequences for failure to attend, and no attendance records will be kept. And I'm going to level. The concept of a captive audience meeting is freaking me out. Let me read you this quote from the NLRB website. First, such meetings interfere with an employee's right under Section 7 of the Act to freely decide whether, when, and how to participate in a debate concerning union representation, or refrain from doing so. Second, captive audience meetings provide a mechanism for an employer to observe and surveil employees as it addresses the exercise of employees. Second, captive audience meetings provide a mechanism for an employer to observe and surveil employees as it addresses the exercise of employees' Section 7 rights. A lot of S's there. Jeez Louise. Ensuring that workers can make a truly free choice about whether they want union representation is one of the fundamental goals of the National Labor Relations Act. Captive audience meetings, which give employers near unfettered freedom to force their message about unionization on workers under the threat of discipline or discharge, undermine this important goal.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're in a meeting with your boss and they're talking about unions, cut that shit. No more. And then my favorite thing is, like, if anyone comes up to you and wants to talk about a union, just be like, no.
Yeah. No, thank you.
And then they legally can't talk to you anymore about it.
True.
Like, that is actually a thing. If, like, say a union rep goes to your building, your work building, and they're like, hi, can I talk? Or, like, a union busting rep goes to your building and they're like, hi, can I talk to you about why unions are actually Lucifer?
They're busting.
Yeah. My brain just went blank. Okay. So you can literally just be like, no, you have to leave. Get out. Go. Mm-hmm. And I love that. So pizza parties, one-time bonuses, etc. are all signs of union busting. And this is a quote from Superstore. Isn't it funny how Employee Appreciation Day always rolls around the same time people are signing their union cards?
Yep.
So yeah, that's a quote from the lovely Jonah.
No, my favorite.
Crazy, but those episodes, like, I hate to be that person who's like, TV is such a good learning source.
Sometimes it can be,
right? But like, the union episodes of Superstore are so accurate.
Yeah.
But they're also fucking hilarious, so I mean, watch them anyway. But anyway, I got some myths here.
Okay.
So, myth. Labor unions are for profit and they just want your dues. Wrong. They're non-profit. And a lot of them do charity work and do really good things for communities.
True.
Myth number 2. A union will make a small business close. Nope.
Wrong.
Not gonna happen. Well, like, I mean, it could.
It's not
but
guaranteed.
I don't think that's
it's like not the pipeline.
right. It's causation, correlation, not causation. Correlation, not causation. Yeah. Myth: unions can force workers to strike. Wrong. So yeah, so it's of course decided by the collective. Again, like, you ask yourself a question about unions. Before you ask a question about unions, you ask yourself, is this something that the collective would decide? And if it's yes, then you got your answer. It's up to the collective. So another myth is unions can't guarantee what they promise. All unions are here promising is a seat at the table. All unions, they can't promise anything other than we will get you into negotiation with your employer. We will get you talking about how we can make this better. And it's on an even playing field too.
Awesome words.
Yeah. Real quick, let me pull up. Just real quick, I'll cut out this like awkward bit. But I have to read you some of this stuff. So this is 35 things your employer cannot do.
Okay.
I'll skim. Tell employees that the company will fire or punish them if they engage in union activity. Grant employees wage increases, special concessions, or benefits in order to keep the union out.
That's crazy. I feel like, what is the point of that? Like, I feel like a lot of like employers would be like, I don't want a union because I don't want to pay you more.
Mm-hmm. But it's really about not wanting control, or
that
not wanting to relinquish
but like
control.
I feel like
because I think
80% of it.
The concerning thing for employers about unions is not the idea that they have to sit down with their employees and negotiate. It's that now if they do something wrong, it's not just a slap on the wrist, because like if a small business does something bad to their employee, it's just like, okay, I'll leave, whatever, who cares. Mm-hmm. And lucky for the small business, nothing ever gets pursued. But when there's a union involved, anything like that kind of has to get pursued.
Right.
So it's like, okay, anything you might be doing that might not be bad enough to warrant like freaking out about, but might not be great practices, you're probably going to get in trouble for.
Right.
But also stop doing bad things.
Right. Exactly.
They cannot make distinctions between union and non-union employees when assigning overtime work or desirable work.
Oh.
So they can't purposely team up non-union employees and keep them apart from supporting the union. Supporting the union either. It's wild stuff. But
indeed,
we're living in wild times, and workers need to remember that employers are not doing anything in your favor.
99% of the time.
Right? I mean, hardly ever is there a genuinely good person that is like 100% giving their all to their employees. But yeah, definitely, it's important to do your own research. I think I have a little conclusion here. In conclusion, unions are crazy. But I understand the surface level now. I try to keep all my research very unbiased, but I think you can see where my personal opinions came through. If anyone has questions or comments about unions, I'd actually love to talk more about them. I found out some stuff I didn't expect and a lot that coincided with my personal opinions. All of my information was researched, and any stats that are here are from reputable union discussing websites. And I put a lot of time into this to make sure it was 100%.
Well, thank you for tuning in to our first info drop. We will be posting these every first Monday of every month. They're going to try to be, this one might be a little bit longer, but we're going to try to keep them around 30 minutes just to kind of keep them a little bite-sized. But otherwise, stay tuned for our regular episodes twice a month on Wednesdays. Thank you.